Hi everyone, I'm very excited to have with me today two very well-known names from the art scene. We have Andy over here, who is the lighting designer for Ceremonial Enactments, MEPAAN as well as Devil's Cherry. And over here we have Randy Chan, who is the set designer for Ceremonial Enactments. So it's such a pleasure for me to be speaking with both of you today, and I was wondering, before we get into talking about your designs for SIFA 2022, if we could just go on a trip down memory lane together and just talk a little bit about, your vast experience having done set design and lighting design work. So as a first question, what is your first or earliest memory of having done either set design or lighting design in a production? And this is regardless of whether you were formally accredited as such or not. Maybe Andy, would you like to go first?
I came from a drama school, and I think I started when I was in school to light shows for my senior, and then I got addicted to it. And I just keep doing. So that was kind of how I started. But it wasn't taught in school at that time. So most of it was kind of went to the library, do my own research, how other designers do it, and kind of used it as a playground to test out the theory that I read. And yeah.
Were there particular designers that you still remember from that time that you were using as a reference?
I think those books that we read in libraries are all from the UK side. So those are the only books that are accessible in the library and in my school. So they don't really talk about design. It's more technical kind of solution or approach in terms of, it's more technical, like lighting angles and intensities and colors. So it's more kind of basic theories and that kind of thing, so not so much on design. So design was kind of I wasn't trained in design, so I have no idea what was design. Even till now, I don't know what's design. I'm just trying to make it up as I go along. Or as I meet friends, people like Randy and stuff like that, I pick it up from them, understand what they do, and kind of formulate my own kind of things. And of course, so not very sure if you want to talk about design. I'm not sure if I'm really the right person. Yeah.
I think I noticed that in a lot of, for more experienced practitioners in Singapore's context, because we didn't have much of a formal arts education in earlier years, right? That I noticed that practitioners would often say, I'm not sure if I'm qualified to talk about this because I wasn't formally trained. And yet I think there's also a lot to be said about just having that space to play and experiment, and actually you learn so much more from the doing of it, right, than necessarily reading about it in theory and then being like, okay, this is like, even if you have theory, it feels deeply important that we are learning and growing through the practice of it. And I think that's very evident from your journey, right, as a designer. So maybe the same question to Randy.
Yeah, I guess if that was a journey, right, mine was about encounters. I do remember, of course, I'm from the School of Architecture. I graduated in '97. It was this text, Erwin Panofsky, the art historian, right? So if there was a real set that started off, it was this this particular machine that I seek to do, and it was a set for me. It was a machine that can read the word of art. Anybody could operate it, and there'll be a reading of the word. You put a poem there, you put a painting there, the machine will kind of generate a codified. So that was that encounter actually leads to zoom by to 2005, where encounters with Glenn Gui, who came back from UK. It was this project, the World Expo exposition in IG. So set in that sense, I would say is about, I mean the training was architecture, and back then the idea was how do we do an immersive experience? And the World Expo IG was a kind of test bedding, because we literally take this immersive experience and really kind of present it within this structure, which is about 10 shop house, and we brought the tropical rain into the pavilion itself. So if that is that set, there was also the encounter which I wanted to share. And I've been fortunate, from there the National Day stage set came to being. It was large. The trajectory, as my practice goes, was a bit road less taken at that time. Architects were just doing their route of building, and the idea of multidisciplinary approach. I would say that it was unheard of. In a way there was, but it was really little. So I guess as a genre, when say set design, for me is spatial. For me, it was also dealing with body. The body here is where the set comes in. So of course, I subsequently did another 4 National Day and 1 Youth Olympics. So in that sense, the set were a spectacle in that way. So during that example, of course, the key part of all this trajectory is that I've been with my practice. We're in the practice of built environment. We strongly believe in the narrative which, well, architecture, we stand the space and time, right? There is also the inhabitant that lives in it. So narrative is kind of important, which brings me to being really appreciative and elated that to be involved in this SIFA 2022, which is a pet topic, which I happen to be dealing with ritual. And I felt that tying back with the 2 years of COVID, it's really an appropriate moment to reflect this moment in my life, as well as so with the rest of us who have went through. Very aptly, it is about life, it's about time, it is about gesture, about as what one would say, the artifact that goes with this whole cycle of life. Yeah.
Wow, thanks for sketching out very quickly your kind of journey over the years, right? I'm hearing that there was first a very strong interest in thinking about space and body, and I'm thinking about the immersive environment, right, in which there is a very clear relationship between the body being in the space, that kind of very specific spatial connection or very specific spatial relationship. And then it sounds like you were then thinking, or it then kind of shifted into this other maybe phase where it was more about creating a visual spectacle for people to be looking at, not necessarily to be in.
Yes, in a way it was a given National Day. It was a show. It's a national birthday, right? So we're talking about a showcase to 5.4 million, right? People, right? So that brief didn't come from me.
Yes.
So it got to be a happy occasion. So it's a spectacle to showcase where we have come from. You know, it's a kind of a yearly ritual. That is a ritual for me. It's a reassertion that how much you love the country, right? So it's karmic as well, because in school I dealt with, I try not to deal with a Singapore prefix, let's say doing Singapore National Centre, anything got Singapore, I run away, because I couldn't deal with it at that time as a student. But Karmic 4 seems to have it. After you graduate, I seem to do a lot of national
Or the World
stuff
Expo.
lah. Yeah, it's strange lah, but life kind of been given to you without you wanting it. Yeah, but it keep coming at it.
Yeah.
So you just dealt with it. So therefore the encounters.
Yeah, this kind of reckoning, right, of the like having to confront your resistances and what does it mean to kind of lean into it. And it sounds like then you have also found this larger theme of rituals as a way of understanding the way you approach your practice. And I think we'll come back to how that might have translated to the way you approached your design for SIFA this year. I wanted to come back to you, Andy. You know, for you, you also spoke about this idea of encounters, right? Encounters with Randy. What other kinds of encounters did you have in your journey so far?
My encounter, I'm kind of fortunate, I guess. I guess perhaps I came about during the so-called the beginning of the boost of theatre in Singapore. So I kind of graduated during those period. And of course then things, you know, when you're starting off something, you get a lot of new information, new ideas, and new technology, so to say. So for example, you got Esplanade. So you start to have like new tools, new equipments. It's like, wow, I've never seen this before. I only read it in trade magazine, you know, things like that. So you kind of like get to understand the tools itself. So I guess the kind of encounter of new things in a huge amount, you know. And of course, the opportunity to go overseas for attachment in opera houses and stuff like that. And of course, shows that I worked in. And I was in the lighting department in Esplanade for 7 years. So in that 7 years, I see a lot of shows. I see from professional to amateur. I see from dance to theatre to opera to concert. So I have a lot of this sort of show performances. And I guess it kind of influenced me. And of course, people that I worked with, companies that I worked with, artists that I worked with, conversation, working in the production. I guess this kind of thing kind of influenced me indirectly, you know, I guess, because I don't come from like a school of design, you know, that I have a particular way of designing it or a formula or a format. So I kind of more of, I guess I came about or questioning design is when I was kind of working in the Esplanade. When you see so many lighting design plans and stuff like that, you kind of question what makes everyone different, you know, what makes, you know. So that kind of thing kind of triggered me to discover more and read a bit more, watch a bit more. Fortunate in that way, yeah. And of course, then through work, a lot of artists influenced me, a lot. Designers, artists. When I was working at Esplanade, they gave us, we were first fortunate, they attached us 3 months in Australia.
Wow.
Yeah. So I spent like 1 month in Sydney Opera House, a few weeks in Adelaide Festival, another month in Melbourne Art Festival. Yeah, so I get to see their process, how they work. So the good thing is that, you know, I was fortunate, I read, so I kind of know the theory of or the process of putting up theatre. So when I was there, I was fortunate because I really get to see what I read.
Yeah.
And I really see how they put up shows, like in really quick pace. Yeah, and so that kind of thing also made me think about, you know, what I read is kind of there. So, you know, I start to discover more through questioning designers and also designers that I work with, even technicians. So, yeah.
And he still continue to question. Yeah, in this, and I think that was really something which I enjoy tremendously. He has pushed the envelope and did it for me in terms of that conversation. Yeah, every time when we have the powwow to come in to meet, he kind of pushes the envelope of what this set can be, which I really enjoy it because we just have so little time, right? But each time, every meeting, thank you, Andy. It was really that push to wanting to make this set as best as it can be and true to that concept of things, which I really felt it very directly. I have done it and without that probing. Yes, it's just a set in that sense, but it is that collective ideas, right? You have to make it. At the end of the day, it's a mise en scène, right? It's a theatrics of everything, right? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm wondering, maybe this is a bit of a cheeky question, but you know, as someone who has seen Andy's practice over the years, you know, what qualities strike you about his practice as a designer?
Well, I remember fondly in New York, it was for Singapore Inside Out, a show that kind of traveled right in 2015 for London, Beijing, and New York. So it was it was a kind of presentation with multiple artists of various practitioners, and of course Andy was with Hosian. Was doing a setup. He was sent. Basically, it's really to do the whole setup, exacting with an exact kind of precision, and I really remember that professionalism and the know-how. I mean, in terms of what goes into that, I would say that set, right? It is really something that I remember fondly, and that was my encounter. Of course, within it, we always been at distant far. Whether he take notice of me, I always joke. I always see him from far, then not approach him. You see, in many ways. So and really, it's been a joy to really coming back, right? Knowing him, I think he is a man of many talents. I think it's not just the light. He's able. I mean, when it's talk about light, yes, you know your craft, right? But you got to also know what theatre is, and this is something I felt in that trade. The valuable insight is not just about light, because for light to really happen, right, you need the media, right, and the material, right, and he knows it, and we communicate in that language.
That's so lovely. I mean, I'm here.
I think Randy very kind. He's very sweet.
I think what I'm hearing from him is, you know, your sense of professionalism, your sense of precision, your rigor to really wanting to put on the best show, the best performance.
Yeah, but
that
this
you
one
can.
is because you have to understand that part. I was the technical manager for Hosen, and so the way I work is slightly different.
As a designer,
yes, that's right. Yeah, because as a designer, I know where I can cheat. I know when I can cut off, you know. I plan for this cheat as well, you know. But as for that kind of complete work, for me, I think my role was kind of like a guardian for the artwork, for the artist, because it's not there. So that's kind of, for me, of course, I think sometimes, I mean, I traveled with his work quite some places. So that's where I also kind of try to find the balance as well. So yeah, it's kind of the, but thanks Randy. He's really sweet.
He's so modest.
Yeah, I think both of you are so multi-talented, right? And I think you were also alluding to this, that when you come to technical management, it's a slightly different way from how you approach design. And I mean, labels are such strange things, right? I noticed that, Randy, in your bio, you talk about yourself as an architect artist. And, you know, for Andy, you just say, I'm a designer for theatre, dance, art, installation, film, right? What is the place of lighting design, since that's what you're doing for SIFA? What's the place of lighting design for you in your broader practice? And then for you, what is the place of set design within your larger practice? Maybe Andy first?
addicted to do theatre. And the idea of theatre, the theatre making, that is actually the things that excite me. And of course, because I was in a drama school and I wasn't specialized, I have to do everything, or rather we have to do everything from directing to back of house. From front of house to back of house, basically. So that's where I get to question myself, what am I good at? You know, where can I contribute?
What is the place or set design for you in your broader practice?
Well, the practice for me is architectural, of course, arises from architecture-based firm. If you do see the trajectory where we are, the era of the 1990s, right, and right now, right, there is a convergence of the multidisciplinary, a convergence of discipline coming together. So I just wanted to lay down some parameter, right? In that sense, right, we are in that era of that transition. So when we say it in specific, right, I'm a designer of this. I wouldn't say myself, I'm a conservation expert. You know, as an architect, you want to do a variety, right? So in that sense, just taking on that relationship of set, right? Set as a something that's temporary, something as a, we call it an exhibit sometimes, because it is there to stay and then it's erected and then it's taken down. It has the ethereal qualities to it. Set as a part that where stories to be told, where it's supposed to be, where theatre mirror the society, right? So it's also a device and apparatus. So how do we look at this work, right? For me, it's architecture. Theatre as architecture, as theatre, and ... Because it is that reflection, right? Whether you kind of condense all the narrative and you play out to the audience to kind of as if it's a mirror to that society, right? That's what some of the theatre's narrative goes, right? So I kind of find when we dealt with the design, in the same spirit as what Andy does, is that we don't say, let's wear ahead of a set. Okay, today I'm not an architect, I'm a set designer. No, we see in the same strand, there is a space, there is that script, sometimes no script, and then we just have to deal with a theme. It could be a word, right? The word that was given, and with some conversation, you start to describe, perhaps you could start from a simple motif, like a circle, you know, in this case, because it kind of trigger. So it can be in the same strand as when you say creativity, right? It's never a linear line, right? I kind of gathered that part by Andy when he tried to say to kind of wanted to structure that question. You can't, because we are inspired from conversation. We are inspired from sometimes midnight. You just wake up, voila! I think I have that. So in the practice, I would like to really say for the firm, we see it almost as a same strand, and the architects are the one that got that kind of work with me to produce. I always tell them that, well, training is architectural, but it's the same kind of discipline that you need to, with the exception, of course, you have to understand the language of the theatre. What is 3D? Of course, you don't build a 5-story building, you use symbol. So in architecture, we do have symbol and motif. In architecture, of course, materiality that we talk about. Shiny object that represent water, light, for example, to sculpt a space. So that conversation will be, you know, the joke here was always been, budget constraint. Let's use light to wash the whole.
That's the most scary thing.
The whole thing. You know, we do talk about that, but precisely this is what this condensed space is about. It is that gathering of like-minded, and then we create that reality. We call it the theatrical reality, and that is that magic that we are supposed to do.
Thanks for
very good.
sharing that kind of fluidity in your practice, that, you know, one leads to the other, informs the other. I see that circularity very, very clearly in what you're articulating, and I think that also gives me a better sense of why the question feels a bit strange to you, right? I think as as a younger practitioner, when I came onto the scene, it felt like there were all these, like theatre was already moving towards professionalization and specialization, right? So I was from the very beginning, people were already asking, what is it that you do? Are you a director? Are you a facilitator? Are you a, right? And for me, the struggle was actually trying to figure out how to explain that I am all of these things. And what I'm hearing for you is actually you had to be all of these things, and now it doesn't make sense to try and say, oh, I'm only this one thing, or like this one thing is separate from other things. And so then I was wondering, coming back to SIFA, and yeah, could you just talk us through your design concept for ceremonial enactments and the place of ritual, right, in the way you approach the design for ceremonial enactments?
Well, when I first had the conversation with Natalie in over the phone, right, it was she was kind of articulating the brief. At that time, it was still hazy, but basically it was in a few key operative ritual, life, time, and he has a sensing, because there wasn't any artist to begin with. So the script was about a lot on words, was a lot about imagery, because it was also on the cushion where we are petering down these COVID measures. So I think that was the initial conversation. So I just wanted to say that conversation doesn't even have a site where we can even have a set, right? Yeah. So the takeaway for the first meetup was, don't do a set, but give me an installation. I see you as an artist, please do an art installation. Yeah, so it was an art installation. The second conversation was about a location. So there was some sequence, right? If you take that as a journey, right? So that was SIFA as a kind of endpoint, right? But it takes that whole encounter
process
again.
to emerge.
Yes, the journey to come. So and then we were looking for location. So as I said, do we have a location first and then do the set, or do we have a script? So all this was thrown out because it said do an installation. So there I was picking on that few words, and the installation was, what's on my mind was this leading path to a light. That was a starting point, really. And zooming by, of course, the set do have this symbol that kind of it wasn't the sublime, but rather it become etched out in hard surface. And further conversation when the team started to brought in, Andy came about, Brian, and we've located a space. And then there was another space that is Pasir Panjang before this space. So there was also the pre. The pre and the current is also different. So what do you mean by set? What do you mean by that outcome, right? It is a site context. Pasir Panjang is industrial, and I would just say that this one job become two in a way lah. Okay, so it is SIFA Part 1 and SIFA Part 2 lah, huh? Right, Andy? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
So we can split into two projects in that way. But it was good because the Pasir Panjang, well, the show was to a limited audience. It was a glimpse. It was also our test bedding of that conversation. We've gone deeper after that conversation. Deeper meaning we kind of understood the having seen the snippet of what the three enactments, Nadi, Max, as well as Mrs. Bhaskar. Unfortunately, of course, that was also the last moment where Mrs. Bhaskar passed on. So I guess it kind of accumulates to this current set. The place is in Esplanade, of course, Western centric, built purposefully. It has a proscenium and for all that purpose, right? what we did as a first encounter was how do we deconstruct it in the sense of displacement of ritual within this very formal theatre. I think that was something that the whole entire team, with a push from Andy, very pointedly in some way, we actually, if there's one word, it was reductive. The idea of taking down, stripping all the Western kind of apparatus of what is Western theatre out, and also flipping the viewpoint. But he stretched further. We kind of decant what is totally supposed to be back of the house, and wanted to reveal the theatre inside out, outside in, and putting the audience right to the front.
Right.
So it was a journey. I think the conversation really, I would say that the set is, as we develop, right, I just wanted to say that the idealization was again about process. I think it is a teamwork. It is about taking a narrative. Of course, you have to take that construct of the word to a real materiality. Yeah, because sometimes it's just a word, right? A feeling, right? I want to show a feeling of going into the infinity. So how do you do that? So perhaps a circle, perhaps a shiny diachronic film, perhaps a white light coming from him. So there were negotiations as well. We often negotiate. Each time we see each other, it's not a simple negotiation. It is intellectual, which is we enjoy it, and then there was a sparring what we could do better.
Yeah, Andy, could you also share a bit more about how then you approach lighting design for ceremonial enactments?
Of course, from Nat, what Natalie
is thinking of.
sharing as well, and of course with Randy sharing how he's conceptualized the set design, and from there I kind of respond to what both Nat and Randy's information that I kind of understood, and kind of just work from there, I guess.
Were there differences between how you approached lighting for ceremonial enactments as compared to MEPAAN and Devil's Cherry? Because that was in Pasir Panjang Power Station, right? What were some of your considerations about lighting for Esplanade as compared to in the power station?
Okay. Wow, this one a bit difficult to articulate. I haven't really think of it, but kind of what I can share is I think the approach after talking to Randy and stuff like that, and thinking about spaces and theatre and rituals, and the whole idea of what anatomy of the performance. So what does it mean for me? You know, so I just kind of bounce back to understand. I mean, sometimes I guess I'm not a very articulate person in a way of questioning ideas. So sometimes my question can be quite harsh. So I apologize.
No, not at all.
Yeah,
just
so
direct.
Very direct.
Yes, but good. Yeah, that's why we push more.
So that's where I thought, like, both in a space, and when do we call it a theatrical space, and what I do is actually ritual. Every day in, day out, we do the same thing. We go in with a plan, we put up the lights, we put up set, sound, blah, 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 we strike, next one comes in. So I see myself kind of like or rather I approach this like kind of a shaman that comes in to set up everything that, you know, what Randy says, what Nat says, okay, what Brian have to say, what Philip have to say, what Max have to say. And I kind of try to understand and find a way to, my entry points, because I would be the last one to kind of express what I can. So a lot of the time, I always try to get the idea of from all the collaborators what they have. And I want to find a common line for my own entry point. So for this, I basically I'm still thinking, because I'm not, I don't have, the idea is not solidified. The idea for lights will never be solidified until we go into the space, flash up the first line. So I'm a bit pressured to talk about this because it's
We don't have to if you don't
I can
want
kind
to.
of what do you call this? Oversell. Yeah. But in any way, I will just do it.
Go
so
for
what
it.
how I respond is basically I'm imagining the space and everything is the set and the bridge are all by itself, and the space, a sense of containment.
Right.
I guess in short, a sense of containment and things happening in this space. Yeah, I'm not sure if
Like a kind of like a world in itself.
I try to create this theatre world.
Right.
You know, what theatre world this is, Singapore perhaps, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, as an element, I mean, just continuing on, right? As much as there's that conversation, right? One of the key thing was when we have what happened if a set extend out to the sitting area. So this has been a bugging challenge. It challenges how we kind of animate, how we light up because there's no rig. So this has been that ongoing conversation. That's one of them. Materiality, I guess, when we talk about in relationship to the this and as well as to the oculus, we do have that. The conversation here is how do we really present these two elements in such a way that they are a destination. There are 2 points where within the stage, right? They are where the three troops, Nadi, Max, as well as Bhaskar will be. And the challenge here is, do we have 3 different set of setting? So that was a challenge to everyone because it is 1 stage, 1 show, 3 acts. So, and by the fact that it is so different in expression, I think this is where what this attempt to navigate, right, in terms of as the language of theatre, right, this is where that journey has been an ongoing one,
Yeah.
to define it actually,
Yeah, I find it hard to articulate now. Yeah, maybe after I finish everything, then maybe perhaps it's easier because I'm still kind of not. I mean, there's still some questionable areas which I've not resolved yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, personal. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm getting from today's conversation is really the very deep sense of questioning and inquiries that you have into your process, right? That I imagine this will keep happening all the way until, you know, they bump in, everything is in a space, you have the performers, and even then I imagine you might still be tweaking things.
Because one thing I think, ideas is free on. Yeah. But realizing the idea, it costs. And that's where I think the balance is for me now. And that's why it's very difficult for me to tell you the fine. Because I can only finalize the idea once I know the budget is all right.
Yes.
Yeah. So I can tell you, you know, and I don't really like to promise things. So I kind of, that's where I think that's for me at this moment I am now.
Yeah.
Because I can share with you all the ideas. You know, but at the end of the day, whether it comes out or not, I don't want to pressure myself too. So,
yeah. And I think what you're pointing to is also this sense of the very real cost of staging a production, right?
Yeah.
Both in terms of kind of financial, but also in material cost. And maybe as a way to wrap up today's conversation, I wondered if both of you could just talk a little bit about the idea of sustainability. You know, I think for Randy, you have been Zarch Collaborators has also been working with sustainability for a while. How do you see the sustainability of, you know, maybe the set or what are the kinds of materials, right, that you are considering to use for the set? And for Andy as well, how are you thinking about how can lighting be sustainable? How can it be cost effective? And yet also in a way that respects the environment, recognizing that lights do take up a lot of energy, right? Maybe Randy first?
Well, I think the built environment have been contributing 40% to the whole carbon emission, basically, right? So as a set, I think to just begin with, if we do it as a material and logistic, right? There was the Pasir Panjang, and there is the actual Esplanade. So what we did was to find a way to kind of build it that it can be reused in two occasions. So that's one way, rather than have two separate sets. The setting was really different in many ways. So we kind of reused the dichroic film, the deck. So that's the physical part. Yeah. But I think in the larger picture of sustainability, which I think is pretty important, the trajectory have been going with less build but more multimedia. Actually, it's the other way around. Because for the build, there is the whole supply chain going from point A to point B itself. Transportation is one of them. So there are conversations. There's a need to build this ecosystem where do we recycle the set, and how do we do that, and where do we source these sets from? Because it's always easy to just go and buy some ply and throw it away after that, right? So what this SIFA, I think, attempt to do, I think, is just one way of not just being mindful in terms of letting the material kind of speaks in a sense that when it's needed, you don't do it, do that gesture overly. Again, this is just something that we take pride, lots of pride about. One of them was, of course, the use of the vernacular wayang stage, where it is reused, the use of scaffolding. So these are some of the little trade secrets, where we attempt to say there's an afterlife for it and to be reused again.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe just a quick comment. You talk about it being trade secret, but I think this actually should be something that more audiences are also thinking about, right? That how are we being conscious of what kinds of theatres and what kinds of art do we want to see in the future to come? What do these theatres and arts, right, the reflection between art and the world and society, I think in the same way that conversations around sustainability are building up, thankfully, in the wider world, it's also nice that these conversations are reflected in the way we go about art making as well. Yeah. Andy?
So for Light's point of view, I guess the only way, technology given now, is everything go LEDs, So that would definitely save a lot. But, in order to change the entire infrastructure to adapt into this technology also costs money. So I think it's a slow kind of progress, which I think some of the theatre in Singapore already kind of adapted into this LED. So I think it will take time. It will definitely happen. When, we don't know. That's for lights. For set, perhaps it's a bit difficult because I think maybe if we were to go down this road, everybody have to rethink as a collective, as an industry, have to think what kind of set are we talking about. Yeah, lights is really just based on whatever existing technology there is, but for set, there is other material, fabric materials such as Randy would know better, but accessible in Singapore, question mark, big quantity in order to build the set, is it, I don't know. So I guess it's I don't know what's the way, I don't know what's the way to go about this. It really needs the entire industry to sit in and to really talk about it and how to approach, because it's not just whatever designer wants, but it's also the directors wants and also the performer. I think it's everybody. Yeah.
It is true, and yet it does feel like we are at a space where more and more of these questions are coming up, and
I guess with all this is actually then at the end, I think we have to make sure that we have the responsibility to produce good things.
Yes,
I think that's the only kind of like a trade-off, I guess. So I always try to, I guess we all have to then start to have this kind of mentality that, make sure that this idea is worth doing it and it's not these are the things that's going to be impact to certain things. So I guess that's the mindfulness that we should have, perhaps.
Yeah. I think I really strongly resonate with that, right? It's not that we're saying, oh, because these things have huge impact on the environment, let's not do it. But how do we really bring care and intentionality into how we do it? The kind of rigor that I'm hearing from your exchanges with each other, where it's really about no more and no less, right, than what is needed for the art to really fully manifest and realize itself. Thank you again for your very generous sharing. It's been such a pleasure having this conversation with both of you. And I guess for the audience, please look out for their incredible designs for SIFA 2022. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.